Canada, a country defined by its welcoming, inclusive, and multicultural characteristics. Thousands of immigrants come to live here every year. Today, Canada's population comprises of more than 450 ethnic and cultural origins. Except this wasn't always the case. Taking a step back into Canada's history, in 1871, British Columbia joined the Confederation of Canada, but on the promise of a railway that would unite the country from the east to the west. This railway famously became known as the Canadian Pacific Railway, or the CPR. But building the CPR would be an enormous job that relied on thousands of workers and cheap labor. Canada was forced to turn to Chinese workers due to the lack of white men who wanted to work on the CPR. Employing the Chinese was a cheaper alternative, as they would be paid only $1 each day, in contrast to the $1.25 to $1.50 that the white workers received. Marketed as an escape from poverty in China and the opportunity to gain wealth, thousands of Chinese joined the work on the CPR. Many were recruited through Chinese contractors in Guangdong, which would arrange their transportation from China to Canada. This is where my family history is greatly intertwined with the CPR. Born in Guangdong, my great-great-uncle Yip Sang left his village for British Columbia at the age of 19. In 1881, he started his work for one of the Chinese contractors called Huang Ongwu Company as their superintendent. During his time on the railway, he took on the roles of bookkeeper, timekeeper, and paymaster, managing up to 7,000 workers. Some workers came from California, where they had worked on the Transcontinental Railway, while a majority were squished aboard large ships from southern China to Canada. Taking advantage of the desperation of the Chinese, Canada placed an additional $40 fee for their transportation and work materials. During their first 3 to 6 months working, a majority of their $1 pay would be used towards paying off this debt, leaving them with a fraction of their pay. Labeled as inferior and alien, the Chinese were severely discriminated against. Rather than being seen as humans, they were acknowledged solely as the fuel and labor force needed to complete the CPR. No food, medical aid, or shelter was given to them. Living conditions consisted of tents that were susceptible to damage from the terrain and weather. About 200 Chinese men died from scurvy, as their meals primarily consisted of rice and salmon, since vegetables and fruits were just too expensive. Viewing the Chinese only as commodities, they were given the most dangerous jobs, where they handled explosives or worked on dangerous terrain. Others died from overworking, explosions, or if a tunnel collapsed on them, causing Chinese death rates to be far higher than other workers. Despite these barriers and discriminatory actions that were placed against them, the Chinese remained as figures of strength and resilience. Between 1881 and 1885, there were 17,000 Chinese workers who completed a majority of the railway. Transporting millions of people and commodities, the CPR became a symbol of Canada, representing its unification. Yet, it was also a representation of those who came to Canada with nothing, but built their lives up with hard work, determination, and perseverance. Reflecting on my story as a Chinese Canadian in British Columbia, I am proud of that history. The CPR continues to serve as a reminder of the thousands of stories that went untold and how we can work together to bring them to light today through our culture so that their legacy is never forgotten.